Welcome back. It is the Vegas Take, Sharp and Shapiro. Glad you could join us. Yeah, if you're betting on some NBA games over the weekend and you bet on the Houston Rockets, you might be a little upset with the officiating. Yeah, it was pretty bad. Let's just put it that way. It got to a point where people were saying, was the fix in? The Golden State Warriors winning game one. A couple of fouls weren't called that were obvious that should have been called. So was the fix in, right? What is going on? The best person that we could ask about that, this is a man who reffed in the NBA for 13 seasons, 1994 to 2007. He officiated 772 games. He's got a great book out called Personal Foul, a first-person account of the scandal that rocked the NBA. And now he is a sports handicapper, NBA handicapper at Ref Picks. Tim Donaghy joining us. Tim, I appreciate you taking the time, my man. How are you?
Hey, I'm doing great. Thanks for having me again.
Yeah, I appreciate. Okay, so I got to ask you the first basic question, right? What was your first reaction when you watched the last 2 minutes of the Golden State Warriors-Houston Rockets game?
Basically, a little bit of incompetence to where the referees didn't want to go against that home crowd because those fouls are something that should have been called, and moving forward, you're going to see that called every time because what it is really is it's a situation where players can get hurt and end up breaking or turning an ankle. So it's something that needs to be called because you want to avoid those injuries that come from that, and that's why the rule was put in place.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but wasn't Auburn's Samir Dowdy called for that exact same thing against Kyle Guy in the final moments of the game against Virginia that prevented them from going to the national championship game?
Absolutely, it's something that is put in place so that people don't get hurt. And I was just shocked that the basic rule was put aside because those defenders were not allowing the jump shooter to land, and that's what the rule is. No matter where the jump shooter starts or finishes, he has to have the ability to land, and that defender cannot walk up into and through the space of that offensive player. So, again, we saw Leonard get hurt. Was it last year or the year before in the playoffs, which really hurt San Antonio? That was a major point of emphasis. And I think moving forward, you're going to see, that called every single time it happens.
Now, Tim, as you know, just several hours ago, the NBA released their 2-minute report about the game, the last 2 minutes, and this was what their response in regard to the foul that was not called on Harden. They said Harden draws Green into the air during his shot attempt. Green jumps in front of Harden and would have missed him if Harden hadn't extended his legs. Agree or disagree with that assessment?
I think I agree with it, but Harden, is able to do that because he's the jump shooter, and the jump shooters are always protected. Every rule that's put in from year to year in the NBA always seems to have something to do with scoring because they want to protect the fact that they want these games, entertaining and a lot of points on the board. So they put these rules in place for certain reasons, and that's one that was put in, and they want to protect these jump shooters. So whether, Harden is kicking his feet out or not, if he kicks his feet out and draws the contact, that's an offensive foul. But to me, it's just the way he's shooting the ball, and he's doing that to try and draw contact, but he's not doing it in a way where it's overt and it's an offensive foul.
And Tim, what about when Chris Paul has the ball? Keep in mind, correct me if I'm wrong, this was still, I believe, a one-possession game. Chris Paul has the basketball. He is absolutely hammered. He's hacked. And they don't call the foul. And then to compound matters even worse, of course, Chris Paul got upset. They throw him out of the game, and he gets a technical, and at that point, the game is over.
Right. It's a big embarrassment for the league, and it's a situation where moving forward, you're going to see these plays called in the favor of Houston if anyone gets up and into the space of these jump shooters. So I'll tell you what, it's going to be a something to see how this is officiated moving forward, because it's really going to come down to who gets the benefit of these calls, to who's going to win the series.
Now, James Harden has complained about officiating before, whether he's right or wrong. You can tell me, you worked with Scott Foster for years, right? You get a lot of complaints from a lot of players about Scott Foster. Here's what James Harden said about Scott Foster. He said, man, I never really talk about officiating, but just rude and arrogant. I mean, you aren't able to talk to him throughout the game. It's not even that call. It's who he is on the floor. It's pretty frustrating. You can't have a conversation. You get a tech. It's lingering. It has to be looked at. For sure, it's personal. For sure. I don't think he should be able to officiate our games anymore, honestly. What's your response to that? You know Scott Foster. You worked with the guy.
I know him well. Definitely cocky. Definitely an arrogant guy. But he's allowed to do certain things that other referees aren't allowed to do because the league lets him do it. He's kind of in the mold of Steve Javi and a Joe Crawford, to where the league allows him to do different things and get away with it for whatever reason. And he's one of those guys that, goes out there with a little bit of a chip on his shoulder and thinks he's more part of the game than what he should be.
Former NBA referee Tim Donaghy joining us here on the Vegas Take. Tim, of course, a lot of discussion after the game as to what was going to happen with Chris Paul. He's been actually fined $35,000 for, quote-unquote, aggressively confronting and recklessly making contact with a game official, the NBA announced today. Of course, the incident occurred with just over 4 seconds left in the game. And Paul, it was a second technical foul, and he was automatic. Apparently, he brushed referee Josh Tiven when he was arguing that Warriors guard Klay Thompson actually committed a loose ball foul against him. Do you think it's apropos and you think it's appropriate what he's actually getting on this, or do you think that maybe some more should have gone down with him?
No, I think if you're looking at the fact that if Houston wins that game and he does something like that, he's suspended for the next game. I think that anytime you make contact with an official, it's an automatic suspension. I'm shocked that he didn't get more, but I think that they kind of feel bad for Houston and the way this whole thing shook out, and they're kind of giving him a little bit of a break.
Do you think that, because a lot of these mishaps with refereeing, they weren't really publicized a lot until recently. Do you think that the legalization of sports betting nationally is kind of creating a magnifying glass on what's actually happening? And this has been going on for a long time with these very important games.
No doubt. I think now you're going to see that, these misplays are affecting the outcome of the game. And even though a team wins, if they don't cover, there's going to be a lot of upset people. And I think when you look at these last 2-minute reports, for example, it's going to expose the NBA in this way. And people are going to call for wanting those reports that, come out in the last 2 minutes, come out throughout the whole entire game, which they should, because they have all that data and information, and they should release everything to the public if they really want to be transparent.
Okay, Tim, so take me into the mind of an NBA official. You're working Game 2, hypothetically, tomorrow. You know that Game 1, there was a ton of criticism, and a lot of people think that the game was stolen, in a way, from the Houston Rockets. So I guess it's a two-part question. Do you, what is that like in the locker room with the two other officials that you're working with? Are you going to talk about that? And, would you say that these officials, if anything, will side with Houston and make sure, for lack of a better term, that they don't screw Houston out of another game? I mean, is that a way of handicapping Game 2?
Absolutely, 100%. When you look at what's going to take place, you're going to have these 3 referees go over every play that took place in Game 1. You're going to have somebody from the league office going over them, showing them the plays that were missed that went against Houston. You're not going to see anybody walk up into the space of a jump shooter, especially Harden and Paul, when they're shooting those 3-pointers. And if there's any contact at all, even if it's minimal, they're going to err on the fact that they're going to put the Houston Rockets players to the free throw line.
So you mentioned the home crowd being a big part of that last game. Do you think that deficiencies like that take place in other sports? Like, for example, the Vegas Golden Knights were on the wrong side of a very, very important home call against the San Jose Sharks in Game 7 of the Stanley Cup Finals.
I definitely think so. I think that you have a lot of officials, especially in the NBA or the NHL, that don't have the intestinal fortitude to take those 20,000 fans coming down on you for an extended period of time. And if there's one call that's marginal and the fans come down on you, you're a little bit less apt to make that call again to go against the home crowd, because you don't want those 20,000 fans booing you again. So you really have to have guts to go out, especially in a close game, to go against the home team, especially in the playoffs.
What would you say to somebody like James Harden if you had a chance to talk to him? Because here's what Harden said after the game. He said, I just want a fair chance. We all know what happened a couple years back with Kawhi, and by the way, Tim had mentioned that. He also went on to say, call the game the way it's supposed to be called, and we'll live with the results. So if you're talking to James Harden, what would you say to him at the start, say, of the game, or maybe you're in warm-ups? Would you approach him? Would you say something to him? And if so, what would you say?
I would say to him right now, just continue to do what you're doing. I think that the league is going to get this corrected. I think it's obvious last year there was some errors with Houston in the playoffs with Harden and Paul shooting. I think there was obvious errors in Game 1. I think that they're going to show these referees, film, and they're going to tell them to make sure that they make these calls if, in fact, they do happen. And again, if it's marginal and could go either way, it's going to err on the side of Houston.
Tim, what do you think about the overall question that's out there? And it's a dark cloud, right? It's a lot of people don't want to bring it up. And the possibility that there is still fixing going on out there in professional sports. Now, look, obviously with your case for almost 11 years, the whole plot line, I think, was kind of a little convoluted with respect to you. They kind of wanted to make you out to be some rogue, referee that happened to make some bets on his own games, and that it's something that doesn't exist, outside of just maybe you or a couple other people. Do you think that is something that is still out there, that still, makes itself prevalent when it comes to professional sports out there, and maybe even college sports?
I think what you have to look for, especially within the NBA, that the league dictates a lot of what they want these referees to call. We have a rule book, right? And in that rule book, it doesn't say there's a difference between how you call the game in the first minute, in the last minute, during the regular season or the playoffs. There's a set of rules, and you're supposed to officiate based on those rules, and you're not supposed to officiate based on the names on the front and the back of jerseys. So what happens is the league comes in and tells these referees what to call, and it differs from game to game. And you're going to see a major difference from game 1 to game 2 just in this series alone in regard to the jump shots. It should be more consistent game in and game out every night, and there shouldn't be a difference of what's called, and there should be more consistency. And until they get that, there's always going to be those conspiracy theorists that think that something's going on behind the scenes, which in this case, there is. When teams are up 3-1 or 2-0 in a series, the league office goes in and tells the officials what to concentrate on and what to call, and it always goes in favor of the team that's down in the series to extend the series to create more revenue.
Tim, can you give us an example of maybe it was a Scott Foster or maybe it was a Kenny Mauer or a Joey Crawford where you're in the pregame meeting, right? You guys have a talk before the game, and one of the officials that you're working with might say, well, I'm going to get that guy. I'm going to foul that guy out, or I'm going to put that guy in foul trouble right away for whatever reason. And you knew going into a game that one team was in a heap of trouble just based on the pregame talk that you had with your two partners.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I can give you an example, based on myself, that I had a George Karl and the Milwaukee Bucks playing the Philadelphia 76ers in Philadelphia, and it was a tie game. It was overtime, and George Karl was giving me so much grief. I didn't want to give him a technical foul because I was going to affect the outcome of that game when it was an overtime game and it was a close game. So I really let him say and do whatever he wanted to do. And when I got in the locker room, I told one of the people from the league office, I said, listen, I have Milwaukee, and I even remember the game was in Indiana. And I said, when I have him in 2 weeks, he says one word to me, I'm going to throw him out of the game. 2 weeks goes by. We go into Indiana. Second quarter, George Karl starts giving me a bunch of crap, and I turn around and give him 2 quick technical fouls, and I throw him out of the game. And I remember I officiated the game with Mike Mathis, and I told him I was going to do it beforehand. And when I did it, he just laughed and shook his head. So he thought it was hysterical.
But I totally believe that. But obviously, if you throw a coach out, I'm not sure what type of impact it was going to have on the game besides maybe a couple free throws. But can you recall a specific instance where you knew a player was going to be thrown out, or maybe a star player was going to get in foul trouble early, and you knew that beforehand?
Absolutely. Allen Iverson played for the Denver Nuggets, and there was a situation where he had threatened Steve Javie, one of our referees. And with that being said, Bernie Fire, myself, and Gary Zielinski had one of the games involved with Iverson right after that happened, and we felt that the fine or penalty wasn't enough for Iverson when he threatened Javie publicly and after the game. So we said that we were going to go in and call palming violations on Iverson every opportunity we got. So we went out in the first quarter. Every one of us called a palming violation on him, and he came up to me during a free throw, and he said, Tim, how long is this going to last? And I said, what are you talking about? He goes, you know what I'm talking about.
He knew what you guys were doing.
Looked at him and laughed, and he knew and I knew. And I write about all these stories in my book, Personal Foul, which is everything's documented with what the games were and what the scenarios were and why the referees did what they did.
Oh, my God, that is completely crazy. And if you're speaking about your book, it is an absolute fantastic read. Personal Foul, first-person account of the scandal that rocked the NBA. Tim Donaghy is also with Ref Picks. And when you just listen just to this interview and you hear his knowledge, why wouldn't you want to go on Ref Picks? It certainly sounds to me, Tim, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but it certainly sounds to me that you probably wouldn't bet against Houston in Game 2. Am I wrong in making that assumption?
Definitely. I'd like to see what the line is because I think the line is going to be adjusted for what's going to take place. And I want to see who the three referees are and if they have the intestinal fortitude to go against that home crowd. Because at the end of that game, if it's close and the calls are going in Houston's favor, that crowd's going to come down on these referees very hard. And they're also going to come down on the referees very hard if they start giving Houston, Harden, and Paul the benefit of the doubt on these jump shots. And you're going to see Draymond Green absolutely go berserk. So it's going to come down to a lot of, my personal feeling is the one that wins the series is the team that comes away with the least amount of technical fouls.
Crazy, but true. Yeah.
Do you have the West or the East winning the championship this year?
I think Golden State's going to be tough to beat. I think they have so many weapons in so many different areas. I think that they're, again, going to be the team that's going to be very, very difficult to beat.
All right, Tim, so you've been on this show plenty of times, and I wanted to give you a chance to respond to this because we haven't talked to you in a few months, if you're willing to do that. As you know, ESPN put out an article, it says how former ref Tim Donaghy conspired to fix NBA games. Now, you've been on my show plenty of times, and you've made it very clear you didn't intentionally fix NBA games. You were involved with some wrong people, and, read your book, you go on and on to talk about that. This isn't about that. But can I just ask you, what was your reaction to this ESPN article? And let me also say, it might be the only time, Tim, that you would probably agree with me, but the NBA is defending you. And they said that this was an old story, that it's completely old news, and that people should move on from it, and there were a lot of inaccuracies. So the NBA, in a way, was defending you.
Not only that, but the NBA, said that I didn't fix games. The FBI came out and said, years ago I didn't fix games. So for ESPN to come out and interview certain people and say that I fixed games, when you really look at the people that they're saying I personally confided in and said, yes, I fixed games, is actually comical because it's my ex-wife. Of course, who is my ex-wife? It's the old book publisher who I sued and won $1.7 million
right.
from. And it's an old friend who I have a restraining order against because he wouldn't leave me alone for harassment. So
right.
There's three people right there that are saying I confided in them and said, oh, yes, I fixed games, which is comical.
I found it, I would be insulted by this, I'm sure you were, when your ex-wife was saying, correct me if I'm wrong, that she was scared by you, that she said she found bundles of money in your pockets when she was doing your laundry, and when she was asked, well, why didn't you confront Tim about it? He's your husband. She said she was scared by you, yet there were no instances of domestic violence or anything like that. That's what I found a little troubling in this story.
It was actually comical, everything that she said, and I think the only thing they got right was the picture that they put in the article of her where she looked like she was about 220 pounds.
Wow, that's a little rough. That's a little rough. Tim, I always appreciate it when you come on this show, my man, and I hope we could talk a little bit more with you as the playoffs progress and maybe talk a little NBA Finals. I want to give you another opportunity to talk a little bit about your website. I mean, the book is Personal Foul. I read it. It's one of my favorite books, I'll be honest. First-person account of all the scandal that rocked the NBA. Can you talk to me a little bit about Ref Picks and talk to me a little bit about your process with all your knowledge and how you handicap games on that website?
Yeah, definitely. We have guys that work for us. Of course, I handle the NBA, and I base the handicapping based on the officiating. Because with the officials, there's positive and negative relationships that exist between the referees and the owners, referees and the players, and the referees and coaches. And I think that plays into the line, and that's what I think makes me extremely successful in picking these games for certain people that want to, bet on these games as a form of entertainment. We have Danny B that handles baseball and football for us. So we got a lot of different people that, actually work with us and help us. And we do this as a form of entertainment for people that, of course, don't want to gamble their mortgage money or kids' tuition money, but instead of going out to the bar, maybe place a couple dollars on some games, and we guide and advise someone how to do it.
What is your percentage this year, by the way? Are you having a good year in the NBA?
Definitely, it's been a very good year. Hovering right around 61, 62%.
Oh, wow. That's incredible.
Which, if you anything over 57, 58%, you can make an enormous amount of money. So usually it's better going in the NBA playoffs. So, we're just starting right now, and we're just getting into the second round. So we're anxious to get rolling here and see what we can do.
In a funny way, you are making money off of, I guess you could say, corrupt or bad officiating. Is that a fair statement to make?
Yeah, it's definitely something where these relationships definitely come into play and affect the line, and whether the league realizes it or not. 2 or 3 points either way is a major advantage based on the officiating.
No doubt. Tim, I can't thank you enough for your time, my man. We hope to have you on again maybe in a few weeks to preview the NBA Finals. Thank you so much.
You got it. Thanks, guys.
All right.
Thanks a lot, Tim.
There you go. Tim Donaghy. Great book, Personal Foul, Ref Picks. I think the funniest part of that whole, there's a lot of interesting things we could dissect in that interview, all right? I'm going to go back and listen to it tonight because it was fascinating. But I think the funniest thing was when he said his ex-wife weighs 220 pounds. I thought that was a very funny part.
He made sure to single that part out.
Yes.
He's actually hoping that she's going to listen to this. He may send her a text message from a different number saying, hey, did this interview today.
I did find it a little humorous, too. You're talking about a restraining order against that old friend, probably from Delco. He's from that area, that Delaware County down by Philly down there. So
isn't that amazing that him and I totally believe that Allen Iverson story, by the way, without the shadow of a doubt. Isn't it funny that they have these conversations before these games, right? The pregame. I did that, when I ref high school games, we have that pregame. But it's all about rule interpretation. And, hey, guys, I think we're going to have a physical game today. Here's what we should expect. So I'm sure the NBA officials do that. But it's so funny that one of the officials says, hey, let's get AI. Who did he say he threatened? I forgot the official. He's an ESPN.
It's Steve Javie.
Steve Javie.
Steve Javie,
So apparently AI, you probably shouldn't threaten an official, especially when you know that he's going to be doing some more of your games. So AI knew exactly what was going on, right? He goes up to Tim Donaghy. And he says, because they were calling palming violations, which they never call in the NBA. And AI goes up to Tim Donaghy and says, he doesn't say, hey, why are you calling this? He says, when is it going to end? When are you guys going to stop? Because he knew what was going on.
AI palmed the ball worse than anybody.
But they never called it.
His crossover was 3 seconds of a palm.
Shap and JD, you guys can totally see Tim on the court just standing there with AI and being like, I have no idea what you're talking about. What do you mean? You can see that.
He said that
absolutely.
He said that he grimaced, and they had a moment where they both were on the same page, and AI knew exactly what was going on.
But that's very interesting how you basically build a relationship and a profile with players and refs and coaches, and I'm sure at some point that comes to a head for whatever reason.
But I can respect one thing that he said. He didn't want to give George Karl a technical foul because the game was tight at the end of the game, but he knew he was going to get him in the next game. Even high school officials, I've had that myself where I'm in a tight game and a coach is just being the biggest jerk in the world, and I get him early in the next game. I give him a quick technical in the next game to let him know, okay, we're not going to do this again. Sit down the rest of the game. So I can respect that about him. Look, he was involved with the wrong people. I do believe that when you have all those people that he was involved with, it was absolutely influencing the way he officiated a game. And there's evidence to back that up. In the ESPN article, there's evidence to back up the fact, that yes, in a way, he was fixing games to an extent, but he wasn't charged with that. He accepted a plea deal. I respect that. I didn't want to talk about that.
What was he charged with? Why did he go to prison?
Conspiracy and some money issues and getting involved with the wrong people. And you're not, as an NBA official, you're not allowed to give gambling tips to outside influences. That was exactly what he was doing. Hey, you want to bet on this team? Because he's got inside information.
Oh, there had to be some felony charges he was actually brought up on.
He went to federal prison. He went to federal prison, but there was a plea deal involved. And when you accept the plea deal, he didn't have to admit guilt to fixing games. And I understand why he's taking that side of it, but let's just call it what it is. Come on.
Right.
When somebody comes up to you and offers to pay you an enormous amount of money if you get a certain side right, how he was first approached, I don't know if you guys knew this, he was getting paid only about $2,000 or $3,000 a game for his inside information, and if the team covered the spread, he got paid. If the team didn't cover the spread, he didn't get paid. So what do you think is going to happen in that situation? Come on. Obviously, it's going to influence some of your calls made, right? It has to. I didn't want to go there with him.
Right.
I appreciate his time and his inside information, and it certainly sounds to me, and I could not agree with him more, I think Houston is absolutely a live dog in game 2. If that is a close game, guys, I agree with Tim. Houston's going to win that game. It's going to be 1-1 if it is close. Now, look, Golden State could win by 25.
Yeah, if they win by 25.
Golden State is not going to win by 25. They have 3 players that can score consistently: Thompson, Curry, and Durant. And they never do it in the same time. But they have absolutely no depth. Livingston's old. Iguodala's old. The Golden State's not going. They're not going to win the national. They're not going to win the NBA Finals this year.
They're not going to win the national championship.
Well, obviously
either.
that, but they're not. They're not going to win the NBA Finals this year.
Here's my
They're
problem.
not that good. They're very overrated.
Okay, but here's my problem.
And if KD doesn't go for 50 or 38,
okay, but JD,
they have no chance.
What has Chris Paul and James Harden ever done in the playoffs in their career? What have they ever done in postseason in their career?
Get beaten series.
Well, yeah, they have not won anything. But
and
this team is much bigger than just Chris Paul and James Harden.
I understand what
and
you're saying.
I think the East wins.
I don't necessarily.
I think the Celtics win this year. To be honest with you,
listen. I don't necessarily. We'll get to the Celtics in a second. I don't necessarily disagree with you. What you just said about Golden State. My point and my only point is until Harden and Paul actually do something in the playoffs, I'll believe it when I see it. That's all I'm saying.
That's fair.
I don't disagree with you.
That's a fair thought process. But
yeah.
They're not going to win by 25, Brian. It's just not going to happen.
The reason why I brought that up, though, JD, is because I'm saying if it is a blowout, the refs aren't going to be able to influence the game. If it's close, you heard what Tim Donaghy said. Refs are going to be an influence. We only got about a minute left. I just want to talk about my Celtics here really quick. Gordon Hayward, okay, he is playing good basketball again. He's almost back to where he was a year and a half ago.
It takes about 15 months to get over that injury.
That is a huge help to the Celtics. The fact that Horford is playing good basketball, it takes pressure off of Kyrie Irving. We all know that Brad Stevens is a capable coach. I agree with you. I think they can get to the NBA Finals, and I think if they do, I think they have a legitimate chance to beat the Golden State Warriors. Chris Wynn, thank you so much for coming in as always. It was a very spirited show, and your father had to suffer through our show in studio as well, so we appreciate that. But we're going to have another fun show, jam-packed show lined up for you tomorrow. Ron Futrell from Channel 8 is going to come in. We will continue the Trumpy talk. I just have a feeling we're going to do 2 hours and just praise Donald Trump for what a great president he is. I have a feeling we're going to do that tomorrow with Ron Futrell. Well, I know Ron will. Anyway, thanks for joining us, everybody. Check us out on Twitter at The Vegas Take. We got to go. Ken Thompson, the legend Ken Thompson, coming up next. Thanks for joining us, everybody, on the all-new 101.5 FM, 720 AM, KDWN.
Kilmeade, Hannity, Levin, 101.5 FM, 720 AM, KDWN, Las Vegas.